Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Kindred Skulls. It's your boy, Nick Olson. Matt is on vacation enjoying the high life this week. Greg is off doing Greg things, so you're stuck with just me, just Nick this week. But we got a lot to get into. We got the Dalton Risner signing, Vikings Twitter. We did it. We actually made it happen. We memed it into existence. We got the Eagles game to go over. Lots of bad stuff to work through, but also a lot of encouraging signs, especially from the passing offense. Feel really good about Kevin O'Connell's scheme coming out of this game. And I feel like a lot of the run defense things are fixable. And then we'll get into a little bit of a Chargers preview coming up. Chargers coming in. It's the Eric Kendricks Union game, if he's healthy enough. It's Justin Herbert versus Kirk Cousins. I think it's going to be a shootout. So let's get right into it. Dalton Risner signed with the Vikings this week. 1 year, up to $4 million, $2.25 million fully guaranteed. We don't really know the full structure yet, so I'm assuming that $2.25 million that he's guaranteed, that's, kind of, maybe that would be backup money, and maybe he gets the remaining $2 million or $1.75 million in game day bonuses. So if he's active for the next 15 games of the season for the Vikings, maybe he earns the rest of that money through game day bonuses, or maybe it's sort of a likely to be earned incentive of percentage of snaps. Something like that. I'm assuming they probably do game day bonuses, so that way, kind of that's how they structured Zadarius Smith's contract. So it'll be interesting to see the full details of that structure, because if he's only getting paid $2.25 million, that's backup money. I mean, Oli Udoh is set to make more money than that with the Vikings this year. Granted, that's under the a veteran's exception, but so he counts as like vet minimum. But Oli Udoh cash flow is getting more money than that $2.25 million. There are certainly backups who make a lot more than $2 million, who are not starters for their team. At the same time, $4 million. If he makes the full $4 million, or the contract is structured such that it's very likely that he's going to earn the $4 million, well, that starts to look a lot like starter money. Garrett Bradbury is barely making $5 million on his deal per year. So $4 million, that tells me he's going to start. So let's talk a little bit about Dalton Risner. I went back and I watched maybe about 100 plus snaps. I watched a couple games and then maybe 3 games of his pass pro run blocking. He came out of Kansas State, and in high school he was actually a center. He was a center all through high school, and then his first 2 years at Kansas State, really his first year at Kansas State, because he was a redshirt freshman. And then the next 3 years at Kansas State, as he came out, he played right tackle, actually. Because it's interesting, because then he comes to the NFL, and he's been left guard every single snap of his NFL career, including preseason. I went back and checked. So he came out of the draft with a lot of positional versatility, because he had obviously a lot of experience snapping the ball, playing center. He played right tackle in college, which is often where guys who are not quite the super athletes go, but who are still run graders. Right tackles being more of the prototype, at least. They're the more downhill dominant run blockers, whereas the left tackle is your dancing bear. Dalton Risner, not a dancing bear exactly. But then he came in, and NFL scouts said, you probably don't worry as much about the lack of explosiveness out of his stance as much if you put him inside, and that's where he's been with the Broncos. He was at left guard for the past 4 years. He tested great. Great broad jump, great short shuttle. That explosiveness, however, and that agility doesn't really show on tape. Maybe that's, he's 28 years old now. It's been a while. Maybe that's, he's better in underwear than he is with the pads on athletically. Maybe he does have that athleticism, but I didn't see it on the games that I watched. I saw some reps of him pulling on power, and he's a little bit of a plotter, I would say. Not the most light on his feet. On screens, he's got really good tracking ability, good body control. So he's able to latch on to defenders at the second level, but he's not, Garrett Bradbury. He's not making reach blocks a gap over or a gap and a half over. He's lucky if on inside zone he's able to just seal the guy ahead of him. So that's kind of, I think, his limitation as a blocker. I would not put him on the tackles. Talking about where he fits on the Vikings, I don't see this. I think it's hard to talk about this without talking about Oli Udoh being put on season-ending injured reserve. That's the roster spot that really opened up the space for Dalton Risner. So that's the corresponding move. We lost our backup swing tackle. Dalton Risner comes in, but I don't see him playing tackle. Maybe they're going to move. Maybe they're going to move one of the other offensive linemen, Blake Randell, maybe back out to tackle. Maybe they're happy with David Quessenberry, who actually I thought looked I mean, he got run over, but for a backup, I thought he played pretty well. Um, so it's interesting to think like, okay, well, if he's not playing tackle, then where does he fit on the Vikings line? He played 4 years at left guard, so your first thought maybe would be Ezra Cleveland, but Ezra Cleveland's played not bad. I mean, he hasn't been like a Pro Bowler or anything, but he's been not bad. Ed Ingram has obviously struggled a lot, but it's kind of weird. It would be weird to bench your second year guard this early on, especially after the Eagles game. I mean, go back and watch Ed Ingram versus Fletcher Cox one-on-one during that 2-minute drill if you don't believe me. But I thought Ed Ingram played not a perfect game, but an impressive game considering the quality of competition and that he was up on the road. So does he replace Ed Ingram? Does he play center? I mean, we're going back to his high school days, really, or his first year of college, but he can snap the ball. Maybe it's an Austin Schlottman problem. Maybe this Garrett Bradbury back injury is more serious than we think. I don't know. Maybe he's just a swing interior offensive lineman. It will be interesting to see. Is this just the sixth offensive lineman on the list? What about Chris Reed? I mean, Chris Reed is still on the non-football injury list. He's able to be activated soon, but I don't think they make the signing if they think Chris Reed is coming back, unless they think this guy's going to be a plug-and-play starter. Let's talk a little bit about whether he is a plug-and-play starter. There are a lot of really smart people who think very, very highly of Dalton Risner. A $4 million contract does not suggest a Pro Bowler, but then again, Pro Football Focus projected him to be worth over $8 million a year. They thought he'd get like a 4-year, $33 million contract or something. And PFF has been generally very, very on point at projecting these things. Spot Rack, the salary cap projection website, they predicted him nearly $40 million, $9.5 million a year over 4 years. So in that context, $4 million, $2.25 million guaranteed, that seems like a steal. So what's going on here? Well, you look back at his tape, like I said, a lot of really smart people really like Dalton Risner. Brandon Thorne, who for me is the foremost internet authority on offensive lineman scouting, he had Dalton Risner as a top 10 guard in 2022. And he had him as one of the top free agent offensive linemen in the entire free agency. And I think there's a lot of advanced metrics that back that up. He's never had a below average passing grade according to Pro Football Focus, and in fact, each of the last 3 seasons, he's had a top 20 pass protection grade among guards. And by the way, that's among left guards and right guards. So when we talk about top 20, that's out of a pool of about 60 guards because each team has 2 guards, so 64 guards really. And he's always been in the top 20. So that's consistently above average pass protection. Run blocking, he's pretty consistently a little bit below average. Not terrible, but a little bit below average. He grades a little bit better on zone runs than he does on gap scheme runs, at least according to how PFF charts them. From what I've seen, I don't think he's good at outside zone, and I think he stalemates on drive blocks. So I think you definitely bring him in more as a guy you can trust one-on-one in pass protection than for his run blocking chops. But to get into what I saw on tape, and granted, interior offensive line especially is the position I feel the least comfortable and the least confident evaluating, so I'm going to give you that off the top. I'm also going to say I only watched 3 games. This is a guy with what is that? Over almost 70 NFL games to his name. So I'm going off just 3 of them, and who knows, maybe he had good days, bad days on those. But with those caveats, I think he has a really great punch. I think he's got really great strength through his entire core. He's got great toughness. He seems to really like jump setting. Across multiple games that I watched, he loves to be get the first punch in. So he loves to sort of launch out of his stance, aim for those armpits, and establish that half-man relationship right away and stop guys in their tracks. He's got a fantastic anchor. He's built kind of like a fridge, Great. You look at him and you think, man, that's a good-looking offensive guard. That's what they're supposed to look like. I will say his lateral quickness is limited. He's got some hip stiffness to him. There were a lot of reps I saw where his back was turned the wrong way. He had his back to the defense. You don't want to see that as an offensive lineman, and that happens either because guys are able to shoot his gap and get past him. I saw that on a couple pass blocking reps that he lost, which everybody loses some reps, but the patterns I saw in the ones that he lost, somebody was able to get past him, so he might struggle with the elite athlete, gap shooting 3 techniques. But you also saw that on stunts sometimes. He's generally very aware. His head is always on a swivel, and he's very, very active looking left and right, making sure there aren't guys penetrating past him. But if he's carrying his guy and he's a little bit late to it, he can sometimes get turned, and he's not really able to torque guys back back in front of him. So he doesn't really have that sort of torquing strength. And I think that's part of what limits him as a pass blocker, but especially as a run blocker, I feel like that comes into play. Like I said, I think he's competent on zone run blocking concepts, but I think the lack of explosion out of his stance, the lack of quickness, resulted in him, some poor blocks. I remember against the Chargers last year, Linval Joseph, who's old Linval Joseph, dominant Viking in his prime, it was an inside zone rep, and he just wasn't able to cross Linval Joseph's face. Granted, Linval Joseph very long, very strong, but he's 33 years old or something, and Dalton Risner wasn't able to cross his face because one was the lack of athleticism, and I think two was the lack of strength to sort of be able to torque Linval Joseph over a gap. Which you want your guard to be able to. That's a bread and butter block. You really want them to be able to make that. So I think he has some limitations as a run blocker, and maybe that lack of that torque strength, that lack of hip stiffness, maybe that's because of injuries. He's played through a lot of injuries. He hasn't missed a lot of time, but he's played through a lot of injuries. And in fact, that if you had made me guess why this disconnect between a guy who people say is a high caliber, above average starting guard, projected to make $10 million a year versus his current contract, he waits too long, and now he gets up to $4 million. Explain that, Nick? My answer is one, I think maybe there's some injury concerns, some nagging injuries that caused him to miss not only March but also into summer. My second guess is that he overplayed his hand with his contract. His agent tried to get him too much money. He wanted a Brandon Scherf deal when in reality the money dried up. I don't buy that as much because every offensive line desperately needs help. And if Dalton Risner is an above-average guard, I think there would be teams out there willing to pay him that. So I don't want to oversell Dalton Risner as here's your guy, here's your answer at guard for the future. That said, I will say he looks like a starting caliber guard with a bullet to me. I watch his tape and I don't see a Pro Bowler, but I see somebody who would be a clear improvement over either Ed Ingram or Ezra Cleveland. Both of those guys we could get into their weaknesses too, and their list of weaknesses would be a lot longer. And I'm able to say a lot more positives about Dalton Risner. I would say he's very capable of climbing to the second level. He's capable of getting downhill. I think he combo blocks very well. He's able to latch onto defenders at the second level very well. He's got great body control to be able to do that. And it's very difficult to make tackles against slippery second level defenders, especially like safeties. But Risner's able to do that because he's got a great punch and latches onto guys very well. And he's got very good awareness. I think the history of snaps playing center really helps his awareness with stunts and games and stuff. So while I think he's susceptible to stunts to the extent that like the lack of hip fluidity can limit him at times, I feel like he's got very good awareness. To me, he's a guy who you can plug and play, and he doesn't know the playbook. He's just getting in here. Granted, he visited the Vikings back in August, so there's probably maybe he knows some of the drill, but he's not. He's got a whole offensive playbook he's probably trying to, read through right now. So I don't think he plays this Sunday, maybe, but I think he's a good enough player that it would be hard to keep him out of the lineup. Now, is that at center over Austin Schlottmann? In my opinion, Schlottmann is the biggest weakness on this offensive line once Darisaw comes back. But maybe Bradbury's online. I mean, Bradbury isn't on IR yet, at least, knock on wood. So is this Ed Ingram you're looking to replace? Again, that's weird because he's a second-level player who I think has shown signs of improvement, at least this past week against Fletcher Cox. But maybe that's the best place to play him. I don't know. We will see what happens with Dalton Risner. I imagine we'll get some clarity once we find out more details about the contract. If it's purely incentive based, maybe he really just is the new Chris Reed. Maybe he really is the new swing offensive lineman, and maybe the plan is they're going to put they're going to move a tackle or a guard back out to tackle. So we'll see what happens there. But obviously, for the Vikings fans who have been desperate for a guard for years and years, going back to, go through the list, Pat Elflein, there's a long list of Vikings guards. Here's hoping Dalton Risner is the answer. And if things work out, obviously he's got a lot of familiarity with Chris Cooper, who's the Vikings offensive line coach, who I think has done a good job. I mean, he's overseen Bradbury having a career year and Darisaw making a leap from pretty good rookie to all-pro caliber player. Well, hopefully that connection with Dalton Risner leads to good play as well. So that's Risner for now. We'll see if he Risners into the starting lineup going forward. Let's get into the Eagles game. I'm going to start with the offense because the defense is less fun to talk about. This was a game that, it's funny, coming out of the Bucs game, I talked about how I had some concerns about Kevin O'Connell's play calling. He gets too cute on third downs. He's got an extremely talented offense, and I just wasn't seeing how the coach was elevating the talent. And if anything, it felt like the talent was carrying the coaching. But this game, I feel like this was, play after play. There were so many things that I looked back and thought like, wow, that's just a really beautiful way to set that up. Lots of little tweaks. I'll get into a lot of examples here, but there were a lot of things that was just like, man, chef's kiss. That was beautiful. I loved how they did that. Give just a few examples. I think the first play of the game, they come out 20 personnel, and it's just like a flood concept. Well, really, this was more. This was a game where I feel like pretty much every skill player was really impressive. I think this was one of Kirk's best games in a long time. I feel like Justin Jefferson continued to prove why he's the best receiver in the NFL. For me, Jordan Addison, this was a bit of a coming out party for him because not only did he have that incredible touchdown, which we'll get into, one of my favorite plays I've seen from the Vikings in recent years, but there were a lot of other plays that I thought like, wow, he's going to be a good pro. I'm ready. Sometimes early, and I think with Jordan Addison, early. That first play of the game, fantastic route by Justin Jefferson. Darius Slay is sort of manning up on coverage on him, and Jefferson's able to not only just sort of stack him immediately at the line, but knowing that Darius Slay is going to undercut him on this flood route, he's able to sort of carry him vertically a little bit, and that gives Jefferson some space to then cut off and undercut Darius Slay, trying to undercut him for the play. But also Jordan Addison immediately stacked his DB on that play. You see that a lot with Jordan Addison. He wins at the line of scrimmage very often. He struggles with press, and he struggles with physicality. So I feel like that's going to be a limitation for him going forward, but I also feel like he's so explosive at the line of scrimmage with his feet. He just needs to learn how to use his hands a little bit better, but his ability to stack players immediately at the line of scrimmage, that's a huge, huge boon to him. It was also, we'll get into it, but he immediately stacked that receiver on that long touchdown he had later in the game. So a few plays to get into, things that I like. There was a duo play. This was actually Alexander Madison's fumble on the second drive of the game was the first play. They come out in 12 personnel. It's a duo play. They motion the Y across, and then they motion KJ Osborne into like a sniffer position underneath the Y. So you're talking about like 6 man on the line of scrimmage, including TJ Hawk. I think it was a Josh Oliver as the Y, and then you motion KJ Osborne in. So you're getting an extra blocker. It's kind of a way to set up, okay, we're going to get at some double teams, but also we're going to have like an extra man. And the way that the Eagles responded, they didn't bring the cornerback in. So it was kind of playing with how the Eagles fit the run to basically get yourself +1 in the box. So I really like the way they set it up. And it set up a good run look, and I think Madison got like 4 yards before the ball was punched out. So people talk about like what can we do to help the run game? Well, that's one thing that they can do is they can use smart uses of motion to sort of trick the defense into being outgapped. And that was a good example. There was a lot of choice routes to TJ Hawkinson in this game, and I think you saw why. This is a game that really established this is what the Vikings thought they were getting when they went out and traded for him. A choice route being a staple of the McVay offense, which is now the Kevin O'Connell offense. A choice meaning like your receiver runs downfield and has the option, if he has inside leverage, he can break inside. If the DB has outside leverage, he can break the other way. If it's just zone coverage, he can just sort of stop as a stick route or a hitch route and just sort of wait for the ball and then try and get some yak. And TJ Hawkins is very good at that, but he's also very good at setting himself up on slant routes and stuff. So you saw that a couple times in this game, getting some really explosive yak. So I really liked what I saw from TJ Hawkinson in this game. There was, on the third drive of the game, they came out in 13 personnel, so 1 back, 3 tight ends. Justin Jefferson was the only wide receiver on the field. And they used, they got into, it was their flood concept, but they got into it into a really clever way. So play action boot, but Justin Jefferson basically comes as like a slice block, almost like a split zone, but but Justin Jefferson is the Y making the block across the formation. So basically, the DB that had to cover Justin Jefferson has to cut through the entire formation across all his defensive linemen, across all the second level defenders. Meanwhile, Justin Jefferson just has to run behind the offensive line. Pretty easy to do. I won't say very easy to do because we've seen guys run into each other with the Vikings recently on these split zone blocks. But Justin Jefferson able to slip out, and the one thing you do with motion is you can set your guy up with a running start. Another thing you can do is you can get him, you can establish leverage in a certain way. And that use of motion in the low red zone did both, where it gets very crowded. So basically you're getting Justin Jefferson kind of just a clean look, a running start on a little bit of almost like a screen, or a running start on like a little slip screen or something. So they got Justin Jefferson the ball in the flat, and that was a nice design to convert for a first down. There was, just to get into more calls that I really like from Kevin O'Connell, there was it was just a slant flat on the 2-minute drill, but instead of a slant flat, it was more like a post flat or a glance flat. And I think it's a very subtle thing, but oftentimes good coaching comes down to really subtle things like this, where a glance route being like a slant, except you take 5 steps instead of 3 steps or whatever, or 1 step. So you just you stem your route just a few more steps downfield. Call it a glance route because the quarterback just sort of takes a glance. It's often paired up with an RPO, as he'll take a glance at the coverage, and if he likes the receiver's leverage, he'll throw the glance, and if not, he'll hand it off. It's just sort of like a short post route. So instead of having the slant flat, which the reason you have a slant flat is because it causes a natural pick play. So if you throw it to the flat, the slant defender will take the inside, the slot cornerback covering the flat route or whatever, and that gets you some yards after catch. But the way it worked on this play was the Eagles' matching rules basically said, okay, now that it's a glance route, he's stemmed his route far enough that the outside DB had to carry KJ Osborne on the glance. Or I guess it was Justin Jefferson on the glance route. And so nobody covered basically KJ Osborne on the flat, because the glance route, he cuts inside, so the slot defender has to take Justin Jefferson, but also the outside receiver, because he's carried his stem for 5 steps or whatever, matches with him as well. So basically, it's a long-winded way of saying basically they got 2 guys on Justin Jefferson and nobody covering KJ Osborne. And you do that by knowing very, very well how this Vic Fangio style defense works. And I feel like this game really showed Kevin O'Connell's understanding of the rules of a Vic Fangio style defense and how to exploit them. And little things like that, like knowing that, okay, guys will match their routes after the receiver takes 5 steps or whatever, so we can use that to exploit how they match with our coverages. Little things like that. It also makes me, we'll get into this, but it makes me a little bit encouraged for the amount of points we'll be able to put up against the Chargers defense, because that's another Brandon Staley being not a Vic Fangio disciple, but a Vic Fangio or really on the tree, but Vic Fangio inspired defense. Really, Eagles actually the same way. I'm not sure their Vic Fangio ever crossed paths with the Eagles defensive coordinator right now, but it's certainly a split safety style defense that is inspired by the way Vic Fangio kind of reintroduced middle of the field open coverages to the NFL. So a few other plays I wanted to highlight. Let's get into the Jordan Addison deep touchdown, because this was, I think, just really high level performance at every level. So it's a fake screen. It's a fake wide receiver screen. The Vikings come out and it's a 3-by-1 set. Justin Jefferson's the number 2 on the trip side, and I believe it was T.J. Hawkinson as the 3, or the kind of the one closest to the line of scrimmage, and KJ Osborne on the far side, and Jordan Addison was the 1 receiver on the other side. And the way that the play is designed is it's set up to look like a little screen or a little hitch route. Justin Jefferson takes 1 step, then looks back for the ball, while KJ Osborne and TJ Hawkinson run vertically down the field. And if it were actually a screen, those guys would be running vertically so that they could engage with their defensive back downfield to make that block. So it looks like a screen play, and what it does is when Kirk Cousins pump fakes to the screen, basically everybody says, oh no, Justin Jefferson's about to get the ball. It's 3rd and long. Let's rally to make the tackle short of the sticks. And then what it's really supposed to do is when people trigger down on the screen, you throw it to KJ Osborne on the sort of the fade route, or TJ Hawkinson on the seam route, going upfield. But because the Eagles were in quarter half, the quarters defender triggers down when Kirk Cousins starts looking at TJ Hawkinson to get to the seam. And so Kirk Cousins, being like having the brilliant vision that he has, is able to look through, okay, I'm going to fake the screen, I'm going to look for my 1, I'm going to look for my 3, and now I'm going to work all the way back to number 4 on the backside. And by the way, he's able to do this while he's stepping up in the pocket. That's another thing that makes his play really impressive by Kirk is Oli Udoh gets beat around the edge, but Kirk Cousins is able to sense it while also going through, okay, 1, 2, 1, no, 2, no, 3, no, 4, yes. So Kirk's able to step up in the pocket, see Jordan Addison. Meanwhile, on the backside, Jordan Addison's running a long post, and he's able to beat press coverage with a great burst release inside, and he immediately stacks his defender. So basically, stacking his defender meaning, he's running downfield with the guy behind him. So if you throw it over the top, he's already open from the first step of the play. That's one of the things that I think makes Jordan Addison kind of a special talent, a first-round talent who's already looks like an above-average wide receiver in the NFL. Immediately stacks his DB. And then he's able to just sort of maintain that stacking, and Cousins is able to sort of step up, make the throw. Addison runs a corner route. And the great thing that Kirk's able to do is by looking at Hawkinson on the seam, it's able to pull the trick safety, or like the safety that's the way the Fangio rules work is your other split safety, the other side is sort of able to poach or able to come down and make those plays on whether it's a basic or a crosser or whatever. He's kind of like a roaming free safety that's able to come down and make those plays. But Kirk basically fakes him out, makes him drive down on TJ Hawkinson. So now Addison's really just one-on-one. He's able to throw it up, and he throws a pretty perfect ball to Jordan Addison. Not pinpoint, but when you're throwing it 40 yards downfield, we'll give you we'll give you full credit if you're only a couple feet off. Addison's able to track the ball well, slow down a little bit to make the catch, and then he's also able to break the tackle while he's in the process of making the catch for the touchdown. Don't undersell that point either. Jordan Addison, not just able to track the ball, catch it, not just able to get open, stack at the release, and then stem his route the entire way, so he maintains leverage throughout the route, but he's also able to break the tackle to get in for the end zone. And by the way, hats off to Kevin O'Connell for understanding with a split safety. This is how you guys. On 3rd and long, you get everybody to trigger on Justin Jefferson because they're so worried about him, and because it's 3rd and long, you want to rally to the ball, and then you set up this route to TJ Hawkinson. But if the trick safety takes that away, then you've got this backside post, and for Kirk Cousins to be able to execute all that, that's just all very extremely high level quarterbacking at the NFL level. So that's a really encouraging play. It makes you feel really good about this entire offensive operation, not just Kevin O'Connell, not just Kirk Cousins, but the talent at wide receiver and the ability for everybody to do it. Couple other plays I wanted to highlight. There was a 3rd down on one of the last drives where they come out 3-by-2 empty, and they set up mesh in a really interesting way where it's the 2 side had Justin Jefferson in the slot, and then the 3 side had Hawk, KJ, and Jordan Addison. And it's basically like a super mesh where Hawkinson and KJ Osborne both did little crossing routes. So the way mesh works is you have basically at its simplest level, you have 2 guys running drag routes across each other, and one is supposed to pick the other defender. And in a pure man situation, you pick the guy, and then the other guy's able to get a bit of a step, and you throw it to the man open. Defenses, however, are very smart at defending mesh because it's one of the most popular concepts throughout every level of football. But Kevin O'Connell sets this up by having KJ Osborne run a drag route and TJ Hawkinson run a delayed drag route behind him. So Justin Jefferson is coming across from the other side, and he's got his trailing defender able to have to get past KJ Osborne, and if he misses KJ Osborne, he weaves his way around KJ Osborne, then he also has to have TJ Hawkinson. And meanwhile, you've got Jordan Addison running like a spear route, like a diagonal vertical route downfield, and all those guys basically just this entire wall of 3 offensive defenders setting a natural legal pick for Justin Jefferson. That gets him pretty wide open, and it results in a huge amount of yards after catch. It was a 23-yard gain on just a simple short, 2 air yards mesh route. So little things like that. There were a lot of plays like that made you think like, like Kevin O'Connell is good. Last one I'll get into. 2 more. One is on that same drive later on, there was a smash concept, Justin Jefferson running a corner route on 3rd and 6. But the motion set it up. They get to the hurry up, so use of tempo gets the Eagles off guard. They motion Justin Jefferson across the formation, And then they go. They hike the ball while Justin Jefferson's still in motion. And what that does is it establishes outside leverage for Justin Jefferson because anytime you motion the wide receiver, if it's in man, the guy following him is going to have to take time to catch up to him. And so Justin Jefferson's able to start running downfield while he already has outside leverage, and he's running a corner route. So all you need is just a little bit of outside leverage, and you've won that route. And with Justin Jefferson, the throw was high, but it was, that was fine. And that was probably intentional because it allows Justin Jefferson to go up and get the ball. But setting up that use of motion to basically establish the leverage you want for that route to be able to convert very easily on third down. Really good stuff. Last one. This is both a coverage breakdown, but also I think it's Kevin O'Connell knowing how defenses work. Was the KJ Osborne wide open touchdown? Anytime you get a guy wide open in the end zone, space is very hard to come by in the low red zone. But all three deep defenders follow Justin Jefferson. That's how concerned they are about him. And I think what you really saw in this game is how good Kevin O'Connell is at using the fact that defenses are so keyed into Justin Jefferson. That's why TJ Hawkinson dominates on these choice routes, because TJ Hawkinson gets one-on-one coverage against a linebacker or against a safety, and he's able to shake them out of their shoes on little slant routes or inside like post routes or seam routes or any of the other choice routes, sit routes or if he chooses to break outside, which you don't see often because of the leverage of defenders, but he can do that too. He's set up to dominate single coverage because defenses are dedicating all their resources to Justin Jefferson. Same thing with the Jordan Addison production, especially on that backside long post touchdown. That was set up because everybody was triggering downhill on Justin Jefferson on the wide receiver screen. And same thing on this KJ Osborne wide open touchdown. Everybody's so concerned about Justin Jefferson. Kevin O'Connell knows that, so he's setting up kind of a mesh concept, a deep mesh concept, but he's able to get a touchdown on it. He was able to do it last year too for the same concept. So really good game from Kevin O'Connell. I think that's true of the run game as well. I think there were the ways that they used CJ Ham and the fullback, and the way they ran a lot of outside zone strong from 12 personnel, so they had like both tight ends on the line of scrimmage, or maybe on the line of scrimmage and off the line of scrimmage, but they were really able to set up some good mid-zone, wide zone runs. The way they were motioning the fullback around to sort of get favorable looks in the run game. Obviously, the Vikings' run game looks awful right now. Part of that is small sample size, and part of that is if you're looking at like say EPA charts, is we've had lost fumbles. We should get into the fumbles because the Vikings. Last week we said it's hard to win games when you turn the ball over 3 times. Well, the Vikings go ahead and then they turn the ball over 4 times this game. I will say, though, they're not going to be fumbling the ball 4 times, 3 times a lot going forward. If you take away the fumbling, the Vikings have arguably one of the most efficient offenses in the NFL. That's certainly true from the passing game. So they're not going to be turning the ball over this off. Obviously, you can't just say like, well, the bad stuff will stop, but the good stuff will keep happening. That's not exactly how it works, but at the same time, at the very least, you can give me the fact that there were 5 fumbles in this game, and all 5 were recovered by the Eagles. That happens very, very rarely. Usually, it's not quite as simple as saying they're 50-50 balls, but really, on average, teams recover about 50% of fumbles. I say you can't really simplify it because, a strip sack, you've got 5 offensive linemen who are there to make the ball, whereas a wide receiver fumble downfield, there's really nobody else who can make the fumble other than another wide receiver. So you're less likely to recover a wide receiver fumble. You've also got the Justin Jefferson fumble out of the end zone. I'm not going to get into the rule. I think it's very silly that the defense is able to basically get the ball back for a play that they didn't really make a play on. I feel like it's completely incongruent with the fact that fumbles outside the out of bounds are spot fouls, or the play's dead at the spot of the fumble. It's weird, and it's anticlimactic. I think it makes for a bad product because you go from red zone plays where Scott Hansen is like jumping on the top of his seat, getting really excited about it, to okay, it's 1st and goal or 1st and 10 from your own 20-yard line. Let's change the channel. I think it makes for a bad product. I think it's uncompetitive. I think it's sort of silly, but it is what it is. So that's kind of my thoughts on the offense overall. I should say I think KJ Osborne had a very bad game. He screwed up a screen. He had 2 drops, including one on a wide open in-breaking route where it would have been a nice explosive, and he just dropped it. And then he also had another one that was just a simple hitch route that he dropped. And That's tough to see. I don't think you're going to see him benched or anything for this, but I will say, Jordan Addison has a great game and continues to show what he can do for you. KJ Osborne, meanwhile, bad time for him to have a bad game. I will say KJ Osborne has a completely different skill set than Jordan Addison. Jordan Addison is so tiny. He's tough though. He's not. He's not like a. There are small receivers who play small, and there are small receivers who are like, I didn't get the memo, and they play scrappy. And Jordan Addison is scrappy. He plays tough. There are run blocks in here where you're like, dude, you're 170 pounds dripping wet. Don't hurt yourself. But he gets after it, which is what you want to see, because the reason that it's really important is you can't be multiple if you've got a 170-pound wide receiver out there who's purely there to run routes and isn't interested in run blocking. And that's why they like KJ Osborne, is because KJ Osborne is a really good blocker. They can line him up almost in the Cooper Kupp role, like an F, or like a move tight end or something, and he's able to take on those blocks, block down on defensive ends. Jordan Addison can't do that, but the fact that he's able to get after it in the run game, I feel like you're going to see Jordan Addison's usage go up. One, not only how well he played this game, but also KJ Osborne playing poorly. On the run game, I will say, they're working in other concepts. They're working in duo. You didn't see as much counter this game, but you did see a lot of duo, and you continue to see their mid zone be their bread and butter. They're working in different concepts, but I'm not ready to do kind of a full, a vivisection of what's going on with the offensive running, because they just haven't run the ball very much. They've gotten down and they've had these turnovers, and so they haven't really had the opportunity to run the ball. And I think Kevin O'Connell gave a great answer about, like, look, our run game has to get better, but we can't run the ball just for the sake of running the ball, except for what it does overall for our offense. But you don't want to be running the ball to get behind the sticks and just be like, well, at least we ran the ball. Like, you don't run the ball for the sake of, like, hooray, we crossed it off our list to run the ball 20 times or whatever. You run the ball to try and score points. And right now the Vikings are not scoring points when they run the ball. They're a very pass-heavy game. Even relative to game situation, they're a very pass-heavy game. Part of that's because they're a lot better passing, and part of that is, I think they're going to try and figure things out. Part of it is, with the Bucs, they're such a blitz-heavy team. There were a lot of stacked boxes they were running into. With the Eagles, not as many stacked box necessarily, but with their talent on the defensive line, particularly Jordan Davis destroying things, Jalen Carter destroying things, Austin Schlottmann getting absolutely wrecked. I shouldn't turn away from the offense of talking about just how bad Austin Schlottmann was. This gets back to Dalton Risner and why I think it's possible that Dalton Risner could be brought in to be a center, because Schlottmann he ruined several plays. There was a duo play where Jalen Carter just swam over him and immediately tackled Madison for a tackle for loss. There was a power play where Jalen Carter just destroyed Austin Schlottmann. They were still able to get 4 yards out of that one, but it should have been a tackle for the loss. There was another play where it was actually on that glance flat where Carter would Schlottmann had a bad pass pro play, destroyed by Jalen Carter again. There was another duo play where Schlottmann completely missed his second level block, so that run play didn't go anywhere. There was a screen play to Ty Chandler later in the game where Schlottmann wasn't able to connect with his defender at the second level because a linebacker swam him, did sort of an arm over move to get past him. So Schlottmann, he's a backup, so you can't ask too much of him, but when you're running 10 run plays and I can list off 5 of them where you got destroyed, it's not a good sign. So Ed Ingram, as I said, he played very well. They were generally double team. The way the Eagles front's set up, they were kind of Jordan Davis was often, or Jalen Carter usually actually was the one technique that left Fletcher Cox generally the 3 technique to the other side. Obviously the Eagles rotate their guys a lot, keep them very fresh, but Ed Ingram I thought came away looking average, which against a very good defensive line is above average to me. So that was good. Brian O'Neill, good as always. Oli Udoh actually looked pretty solid. I don't want to say too much because he did give up that strip sack. And David Quisenberry also looked like, for a backup, I will take this, but you really hope Christian Darrisaw gets back, Garrett Bradbury gets back. Honestly, the pass pro overall was a lot better than I expected. And again, when you're on the road, You're doing silent snap counts. It's a lot easier for the defensive line to time their snaps and to get off the ball. And the Eagles guys really get off the ball really fast. Milton Williams, he rotated in a lot, didn't really do anything. So an above average game in terms of pass protection, run blocking could have been better. But the biggest problem for the offense right now is, why are we turning the ball over so much? I'm confident that Kevin O'Connell is going to continue to scheme things up well. I'm confident that with the skill players playing at the level they are right now, I'm confident saying Jordan Addison is going to be a good NFL pro already. I'm confident saying Justin Jefferson is the best wide receiver in the NFL. And TJ Hawkinson, if you leave him one-on-one in coverage against somebody who's not a cornerback, is going to be able to get open. This passing game is going to be efficient for the entire year. I feel very good about the passing game coming out of this game. The defense, let's get into. This is, in some ways, kind of a boring defensive performance to break down. The run defense, let's start with the run defense to just rip off the Band-Aid. So Brian Flores is a maniac. He does a lot of things where you're like, dude, what are you doing? Let's talk about that 17 play, or, it probably wasn't actually 17 plays, but it was something close to it, maybe 15 play drive before the half. He had one defensive tackle out there for a drive where they ran the ball 10 times plus. One defensive tackle. And their run fits, they were like -2, arguably -3 in the box if you count Jalen Hurts as an extra man. So, ideally you want to be fully gapped out. If there's 5 blockers, you want 6 guys on the line of scrimmage, 1 to protect the outside of each tackles, the C gaps, 1 to protect the gaps between the tackles and guards, the B gaps, and a guy in between each of the A gaps between the center and the 2 guards. And that way, wherever the running back goes, there will be a man to meet him. Sometimes if you want to live in too high world where you're taking an extra man and you're dedicating him to coverage, you leave one of those gaps exposed and say maybe a safety will spill or will fill down from depth, or maybe you'll have a linebacker who's responsible for covering 2 gaps at once, and he's sort of able to, he has to read the running back to be able to fill. And sometimes especially with the Fangio defense, you'll have guys sort of gap and a half where they're not going to shoot their gap, but what they're going to do is they're going to lock their man out, and they're going to try and play both sides of him and be able to sort of shed their tackle, lock peek, shed technique, where they're able to make a gap over. So that it's one thing to play, 1 man down, but when you're 2 or 3 men down and you're also playing with 1 defensive lineman and 2 outside linebackers and 3 inside linebackers, you're just begging, especially against the Eagles' offensive line, which is arguably one of the best in the NFL. You're asking you to get run over. And it's not like Sirianni did anything particularly schematically interesting. They were running kind of the same play over and over again. It was just kind of zone reads. Sometimes they would mix it up with split motion, where Dallas Goedert would motion across the line of scrimmage as sort of a changeup, but it was kind of just zone reads. I charted this entire game, and I'll Control F right now in my notes. Zone read. How many zone reads do I have? Like 30. So they just ran the same play all game, and Brian Flores is a maniac who doesn't really care about schematically what he was trying to get at. What I think is he was saying, I'm worried about Devontae Smith. I'm worried about A.J. Brown. I'm worried about Jalen Hurts' running ability. I'm going to let them run, for 5-6 yards a pop. You can do that. You can win games. Jamal Charles is not, Jamal Charles averaged 5-6 yards a pop his entire career, and he lost a lot of games too. I will absolutely take that if it means that Jalen Hurts processes rush. We're getting guys in his face, and we're getting a lot of positive plays on defense. And they were able to do that. They were able to get a lot of tackles for loss. They were able to get a lot of sacks. They were able to get an interception. They were able to get positive plays. There were a lot of tackles for loss. They were ahead of the sticks a lot of the times too. And there were a lot of checkdowns that they were able to force by dropping 8 and running either a cover 3 or a Tampa 2. So it's just you can't go that far with it at the NFL level against a run attack as good as the Eagles, with the offensive line as good as the Eagles. I mean, there were a number of plays where Ivan Pace, God bless him, was just getting trucked downfield 5, even 10 yards on occasion because, he's 200 pounds wet and he's going up against guys who are 320 pounds, who are just bulldozing him because they line him up on the line of scrimmage. It's one thing to come from the second level and be able to sort of, be a sloop among galleons, but it's another thing when you're lining up in the A gap, mugging the A gap, and they're just immediately able to latch onto you at the line of scrimmage. So shout out to Harrison Phillips. I think he actually had a really good game. He was often the lone interior defensive lineman on a lot of these looks, and he played very well. But at the end of the day, they just did not respect the run at all, and they made a tactical, really a strategic decision to say we are going to sell out to stop the pass and to stop Jalen Hurts and to get pressure in his face, and we're going to blitz all the time, or at least on the plays where we don't blitz, we're going to show blitz and then drop back into drop 8 or something, but we're going to be always forcing pressure, and we're just going to not super worry about gap discipline or having the right personnel on the field. But I do think you can criticize Brian Flores on that long drive for not subbing in an additional defensive lineman. I mean, it was Harrison Phillips, DJ Wanham, and Pat Jones for most of that drive. That was your defensive lineman, and it was Ivan Pace, the undersized guy, and Jordan Hicks. And they were making plays, and they were limiting the damage to 5, 6, 7 yards a pop. But like, if you let them have that, and you're not going to sub in heavier personnel, you're going to get run all over. And eventually, on later drives, they worked in Dean Lamory, they worked in Kairos Tonga, but even they were never at any point abandoning their sort of. They were always playing at least one person down in the box, especially when you consider, again, when you have the threat of a quarterback keep on a zone read, that's another guy that you have to fill into the box because you have to have a guy to account for the quarterback. That's another, really, it's like another gap to fit. When you're fitting the run, the mobile quarterback adds +1 to the offense. So Vikings were down 2 or 3 and in the deep on the whiteboard, and they were down about 200 pounds or something just on the personnel matchup. So I can go over like 20 plays in detail, but it won't be interesting to talk about because it was as simple as like, look, the safeties had to fill from depth time and time again. DeAndre Swift, I thought he had bad vision, but it turns out he's actually pretty good when you make it this easy for him. And look, there was one gap he left unfilled. DeAndre Swift was able to find it pretty much every time. And when he found it, he put the pedal to the metal. And then you had Cam Bynum filling from depth, 10 yards off, and it was a gain of 6 or whatever. And then you had a couple plays, like at the end of the game, where you had Cam Bynum and Harrison Smith filling from depth, and they missed the tackle. And so it goes for, what was that last explosive run? 43 yards. It goes for 43 yards. Josh Metellus gets swallowed up by the offensive line because he's showing blitz on the line of scrimmage. Both safeties miss the tackles because DeAndre Swift takes an angle, and the safeties aren't able to make the tackle. They aren't able to wrap up, and he just sort of runs down the sideline and gets 43 yards on a simple zone read play. I mean, this is that's not serious gap fitting. So I go into this much detail because I think it's schematically it's interesting, the strategic decision Brian Flores made to just sort of be like, screw run defense, we're going to limit the passing game, we're going to limit Jalen Hurts. And they did that, but they did it at the expense of getting up and down the field. Losing time of possession too. At the end of the game, it became relevant because it kind of became clear the Vikings wouldn't be able to have a comeback opportunity because the Eagles were able to sort of grind out the clock. So again, like, the Eagles weren't mixing it up. They were running the same play, zone read or split zone read. But the problem was there was always a gap uncovered, and the safeties always had to be filling from depth. And then the safeties had to be perfect. You had some mistakes too as well. I think there was a time Caleb Evans didn't fit the run from the edge, and DeAndre Swift was able to bounce it outside. There were plays where, Tonga and Bullard kind of got moved a little bit, a gap over, so there was a large hole. There were a lot of plays where it was Pace's gap, but he's just not able to make a play when he's matched up against an offensive lineman who's immediately latches onto him at the snap. So that was kind of what happened with the run game. The passing game was very good, except for the 3 explosives they gave up, which is like, those count too. So to talk about everything else that went wrong, on the first drive, so the Eagles were play action with like 2 verticals downfield, and the Vikings were in kind of a cover 2 shell. They were blitzing 5, so it was kind of like a fire zone coverage. Theo Jackson basically wound up matched on Devontae Smith, and he was able to cover Devontae Smith, but it was underthrown just enough that he was able to make the catch up. And Theo Jackson actually did a great job getting his hand up without committing defensive pass interference. I think Most of the times, that catch is not made because Theo Jackson he got his ball right in the catch point, but Devontae Smith, just very strong grip, was able to come down with a contested catch. That one is bad. You feel bad about it, and when you live in a cover zero world, that's going to happen. In fact, the Eagles, as they realized that Brian Flores was really, he was going to continue to live in cover zero world, they throw out more and more double moves to take advantage of this because double moves are very punishing on cover zero because you don't have safety help. But on this one, Theo Jackson, the ball was a little underthrown, but he's able to make it. Ideally, you hope in an ideal world, pressure gets home. Ivan Pace had a really good pressure on that play. He basically immediately did an arm over on DeAndre Swift, who I believe was the back in protection, and then was able to Jalen Hurts climb the pocket, and Pace was able to immediately pivot, turn around, and scramble back, and he got a QB hit on that play. So Pace showed a lot of really good things from a pass rush perspective. Certainly against running backs, but even against guards, he's got a nice arm over move, and he's very slippery and agile. He's not obviously when you talk about how good he is as a pass rusher, obviously he's not somebody you line up on the line of scrimmage as like a Daniil Hunter type, but he does have some ability to beat blocks, and I feel like you saw a lot of that, and the ability to sort of redirect and bend. Those things come in handy. So that was a good thing, but obviously, on that play, you give up a 54-yard completion because it's single coverage and your safety isn't able to make the play at the catch point. That sucks. A couple of what was the Devontae Smith touchdown. So that was another play where they rushed 6. It's tough to say how Brian Flores coverage rules work because the way he plays it, a lot of the times he has 5 guys dropped to the sort of the first down marker, and I don't know when they match or how they match, but the way this worked out was it was almost like, imagine it's quarters or something, and Caleb Evans was the outside corners and Harrison Smith was the quarters safety right next to him, and Harrison Smith drove on the running back who was running out to the flat, and so Caleb Evans wound up one-on-one with Devontae Smith running vertical for a touchdown. And Evans just lets Smith run past him. Smith gives him a little bit of a double move or a little bit of a hesitation where he slows down to 70% speed, then back up to 100% or something. It's enough of a hesitation to get Evans to sort of be caught flat-footed and running downfield. Hurts makes a nice throw, and Evans isn't really able to catch up to him because Devontae Smith is pretty darn fast. I will say, I don't know if that's entirely on Caleb Evans. It's at least partially on Caleb Evans, but Caleb Evans looked a little frustrated after the call. It's possible that he was expecting inside help from Harrison Smith. At the same time, though, I think Harrison Smith has to respect the flat route because he can't just carry Devontae Smith downfield. Otherwise, that flat route would have acres of space in front of him. So that one's kind of just on Caleb Evans, who actually, I don't want to dog on him a little bit too much because I've said a couple negative things about him, but I will say, especially early on in the game, the Eagles saw, okay, Brian Flores is going to blitz every snap. We're going to hit him with a number one counter we have to the blitz, which is a wide receiver screen, which you show cover zero, you get all these guys right around the tackles, right inside the box. What a wide receiver screen, and says, okay, now we have numbers to the outside. We're going to get the ball in one of our playmakers' hands, and all they need is a solid block or a slip tackle, and they're off to the races. So it's really one of the top ways to beat the blitz. And on at least 3 occasions, Caleb Evans was able to block the wide receiver into the receiver who caught the screen and able to either, if not make the stop himself, allow Cam Bynum, who also had a good game, to come downhill, rally to the ball, and make the stop for, if not a tackle for loss, then for a minimal gain. So that was really good to see from Caleb Evans. And the reason I emphasize that is because if you remember how much Mike Zimmer liked to mug the A-gaps, one of the main ways people beat the linebackers mugging the A-gaps was to throw to the flat. But once Anthony Barr and Eric Kendricks were able to understand how quickly they could buzz to the flat and make those plays, it kind of took away the number one counter to the defensive scheme. So that's really, it's every defensive scheme has its weaknesses. And, Earl Thomas being able to cover the seam in cover 3 was a thing that really unlocked the Seattle Seahawks, because the seam is the weakness of cover 3. But when you have players who are aware of the weakness of your scheme and are able to counter it, are aware of it and able to counter it, that's a game changer. So with the Vikings, having cornerbacks who are able to understand that wide receiver screens are a counter to the blitz, it really sets, and we understand that we're going to be looking for it, and we're going to blow up guys, we're going to blow up the blocks, and we're going to rally to the football. that really sets up the blitz heavy Flores scheme to work really well. So that's all the negatives from the defense, which is most of the defense, but there are some positives to take away as well. Theo Jackson had that interception, which was Eagles were running dagger, so the number 2 receiver runs vertical, and the number 1 receiver, the one farthest to the sideline, runs kind of a square in underneath it. So the idea being that receiver clears the safety underneath, and then you've got this guy coming horizontally across the field, and you get the ball to him. That was just a bad throw by Jalen Hurts because the Vikings, that was another play. They dropped 8, and I think it was, I don't remember if it was Tampa 2 or cover 3, but basically Theo Jackson didn't have to go a long way to make that interception, and Hurts was kind of throwing into, I wouldn't say double coverage because it was spot drop zones, but he was throwing into a dangerous place where both zone defenders were able to make a play on the ball. Theo Jackson was able to make up for the Devontae Smith long 54-yarder and get an interception. So that was good to see. I mentioned the pace, pass rushing, how good he looked. Byron Murphy had a really nice pass breakup on I think it was a quick out. Really nice click and close there. Daniil Hunter had 3 sacks in this game. A lot of them were cleanup, but I still give Hunter the credit, 1 for battling and 2 for a lot of this. So I talked a lot about Brian Flores' scheme being very blitz heavy, but his number 2 concept that he likes to run is basically Tampa 2, which is, you don't see that very often. Especially it's a drop 8 version of Tampa 2, where it's a cover 2 look, so 2 deep safeties, and then you've got a pull runner, we'll call him, where it's a linebacker who plays in between the 2 safeties and is in a deep zone, but not as deep as the 2 very deep safeties. And then you've got, like in cover 2, 5 underneath zones. And it kind of is a way to take away the explosives and take away everything underneath. Sometimes there are holes in there if you've got a quarterback with a really strong arm. But for the most part, you're kind of able to basically take away everything, and the only problem is you've only got 3 defenders. But the reason I think it works for Brian Flores and he's able to live with this is Daniil Hunter is so good that Daniil Hunter gets pressure, give him 3 seconds, 3.5 seconds, and he will get home even if he's being double teamed. And you saw that in this game. There was one of his sacks, he was basically double teamed and was able to split the guard and the tackle and able to get after Hurts and with his long arms be able to drag him down for a sack. So Daniil Hunter up to 4 sacks already through 2 games. That's a positive. We will absolutely take that. Granted, they haven't all been super impressive, but he's also had really impressive pressures that have not resulted in sacks. So it kind of evens out. So that's my read on the defense. Obviously, a difficult one to watch live. It's demoralizing to have a defense, an offense run you up and down the field, and there's nothing you can do about it when they're running literally the exact same play over and over again. But these are correctable. They just need to make the strategic decision to put more than 1 defensive tackle out there, or sometimes more than 2. You can live out of odd fronts with 3 defensive tackles. You can throw out more bear. You can substitute Ivan Pace and Asamoah for other players who are bulkier, or if you're going to live with them, you can help them out by having Tonga out there occupying double teams. I think that was one thing that made the run defense very good against the Bucs. Let's remember, run defense against the Bucs was very good, is by keeping those linebackers clean and allowing them to rally to the ball. So I think the run defense issues are fixable. You're also not going to be playing the Eagles' offensive line every week. The pass coverage issues, I think you're going to continue to see explosives. You're going to continue to see a Caleb Evans or Byron Murphy or Mekhi Blackman or whoever, if it's a safety like Josh Metellus or somebody mashing up on somebody on one-on-one. I think you're going to continue to see shot plays. I think defenses or offenses know that that's kind of that's one of the ways you beat this defense is you throw those shot plays downfield, and hopefully, not all of them are going to be complete, but hopefully you get at least 1 or 2 of them throughout a game, and often that's enough to break a game open if you get a 50-yarder or something. And so I think you're going to continue to see those, and I think you're going to see Brian Flores coach the point that guys really have to be ready to carry those verticals. They have to be worried about them. They can't just defend everything underneath. But I think in the coverage game, the fact that you limited an MVP candidate to not very much, and you were able the passing EPA per play for the Eagles was pretty limited. So I think you're happy with that, with all the sacks you were able to get, with the interception, with everything else, and I think the run defense is fixable. This is the Brian Flores experience. He's gonna do crazy things. He's gonna, He's going to completely ignore the run. He's going to call cover zero in the most inopportune times, and he's going to run Tampa 2 at other times. He's a mad scientist, and sometimes you got to let him experiment a little bit. I think this is an experiment that largely went wrong, but next week is a new week in any given Sunday. So I think this Chargers game will give them a chance to turn the leaf. We got a Chargers team coming into town, slipping over to them. Chargers are 0-2, just like the Vikings are. So it's a battle of 0-2 teams, and the Chargers coming into town. And the Vikings, they've got one of the most efficient passing offenses in the NFL. And the defense, strangely, really underperforming. They are the last defense in the NFL, I think, by both DVOA and EPA per play. Neither of those are very predictive, especially in season after 2 games. But suffice to say, the Chargers defense has not played at the level you would expect. A Brandon Staley, well, people don't really like Brandon Staley, but I respect Brandon Staley as sort of a Fangio world defensive mind. I think part of the problem is they were supposed to have the best pass rushing duo in the NFL between Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa. And so far, Joey Bosa has been really limited by a hamstring injury. And he does not look healthy yet. Maybe he gets healthy for this game, because when he is healthy, obviously, he's a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. And then Khalil Mack, maybe it's age. I'm not really sure what it is. But I think, especially as a pass rusher, he's just been pretty limited. Maybe that's just because, who is Austin on the Dolphins or whoever, these guys, the tackles he was up against with the Titans, with the Dolphins, were able to keep them to quiet games, and maybe that will not be the case, especially if we've got David Quisenberry or whoever out there against him. But you want your stars to play like stars, and right now I would say they're playing at an average to below average level. So that's problematic. They're also a little banged up. Eric Kendricks is out. Or he was out. Maybe he'll have a chance to get healthy. Austin Eckler, their Pro Bowl running back, banged up his ankle, so we'll see if he's healthy. Obviously, I mentioned Joey Bosa. There's a couple other guys, but those are kind of the important ones. So I think the thing that gives me the most confidence going into this Chargers game is it's at home, and we just saw how good Kevin O'Connell is at picking apart a Fangio-style defense, having gone up against Ed Donatel, and really knowing the ins and outs about, okay, this is the coverage they check to when you do this motion. This is when this zone matches up against this wide receiver. This is how they counter X, Y, and Z. And so once you really know the rules, you really are able to exploit the rules. And I feel like this is another game where a lot of the things that they did well against the Eagles will translate to the Staley defense, because it's not the same as, the way Sirianni runs like the Fangio style defense, but it's a lot of the same. You're going to have your trick safeties. You're going to have your split safety rules. You're going to have, quarter half. You're going to see guys run the half side or run Zeus or whatever it's called. Not to get bombastic and throw a bunch of football jargon at you, but just sort of a lot of the ideas for how you slow down Justin Jefferson and how you respond to motion and how you check to various coverages is consistent across all these Fangio-style defenses. And I feel like what we've seen now is that Kevin O'Connell is very good at beating these styles of defenses, and I feel like this defense is less talented than the Eagles one we just saw. Derwin James is the guy to have the most respect for when Joey Bosa is hobbled, but he's a safety, and you can move him around. You can put him on TJ Hawkinson, but you don't want Derwin James on Justin Jefferson, because I don't care how good your all-pro safety is, he's not manning up against Justin Jefferson. So other than that, their cornerbacks, that Asante Samuel was supposed to be good, but he has not played like it. J.C. Jackson, another guy who was kind of not playing up to his stock level. With the Eric Kendricks injury, they've got Ken Murray, who's had was drafted the first round and kind of has not lived up to it at all, and they got backups in there as well. So this is a defense that I think you can. I think you could run against if you wanted to, but I really think you could pass against this defense. And that's what obviously that's what the Dolphins did. But the Titans were able to do this too. So I think it has the potential for a shootout, because on the other side of the ball, you got Justin Herbert, who, people sort of criticize his game, but he, to me, looks like a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. He has a lot of what you want in terms of the processing, the accuracy, on top of what everybody already knows about him, which is that he has got a howitzer for an arm. and he's got a lot of athletic ability and creativity. And I think that's true, but I think people also underappreciate how good he is at like getting to his check down, getting to Austin Eckler, how good he is at sort of reading coverages and taking care of the ball and making the smart decisions. He's just a really good all-around quarterback, and I think you have to have a lot of respect for him. I think especially with the way Flores runs his spot drop zones, I worry a little bit about Tampa 2. Like, for example, in the Eagles game, there was they ran, I think it was Tampa 2, drop 8, and Dallas Goedert ran a corner route. And Jalen Hurts just didn't have the arm strength to get it in there. Jalen Hurts, obviously a fantastic quarterback, not a big arm quarterback. Justin Herbert, he will nail that corner route into the honey hole between the safety and the cover 2 cornerback underneath. So you have to be careful about spot drop zones when you got a quarterback as strong armed as Justin Herbert. So maybe we'll see a little bit more zone match than spot drop zone. You also have to respect, Keenan Allen, old, but continues to be one of the best route runners. I mean, Justin Jefferson himself will tell you Keenan Allen is somebody he studies to learn how to run routes well. He's never been an elite athlete, but very good at uncovering against man coverage. If you want to live in a cover 0 world, you have to worry about your wide receiver screwing up on a double move against Keenan Allen or something. Mike Williams, the Vikings don't have a lot of size at cornerback. Mike Williams is the kind of wide receiver who's, what is he, 6'4", 6'5", really able to box guys out at the catch point. They've got Josh Palmer, and they've got a first-round rookie wide receiver as well. So they've got weapons. We'll see if Austin Eckler's back. If not, Josh Kelly's a good backup. And then their offensive line, headlined by Rashawn Slater, who's arguably the best left tackle in the NFL right now. I know there are a lot of smart people who think that. And not necessarily a lot of weak links, I think, on the offensive line. They brought in Corey Linsley from the Packers, who's still going strong. They brought in Zion Johnson as a free agent. I'm mixing up my Johnsons. They drafted Zion Johnson in the first round a couple years ago. So they've got Trey Pipkins, the right tackle, is a solid right tackle. So this is a good offense. And with all that said, they are performing at an extremely high level. I think they're, third or something in EPA per play. So this is a very, very good offense. I feel like it will be interesting to see how Brian Flores combats this. This is another offense where I worry a lot about what Justin Herbert can do to you. I think this is the kind Brian Flores' attack mentality on defense is kind of, I want to pressure the quarterback and I want to take things away from them and I want them reacting to us rather than us reacting to them. So I feel like you'll probably see a blitz-heavy attack, but anytime you're going to live and die by the blitz, you are going to die by the blitz if you don't have the guys on the back end to carry things, and that's where the Theo Jackson explosive, the Caleb Evans explosive touchdown, the Devontae Smith deep receptions, and there, by the way, there were other double moves. Byron Murphy got burned on a double move, I think to Devontae Smith as well, but that one got called back on holding. And there was another double move. I think that was to Evans as well against the Eagles, but Hurts' pass was just a little bit overthrown. Just barely able. I mean, Evans was able to catch up to it, but so it would have been a tough catch. But I think with a perfect throw, that was a touchdown too. So potentially 4 explosives, 40, 50-yard throws against the Vikings living out of cover 0 world. So you do that against Justin Herbert. Herbert, as good as Jalen Hurts is, I think Herbert's a better quarterback. So you don't have the margin for error. So I think this will be a shootout. I will say. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Josh Palmer, these guys are not burners the way that like Devontae Smith or A.J. Brown are. So you can probably live a little bit more with less too high safeties. But you're still dealing with an exceptionally talented quarterback and a good offense. I mean, Kellen Moore's, he's doing good things, I think, with the Chargers right now. So I think we're in for a very entertaining game. Again, despite the Vikings being 0-2 and the Chargers being probably one of the better 0-2 teams in the NFL, I feel like the Vikings have a good chance to make this one competitive. I think people are sleeping on the Vikings a little bit because they're not going to be fumbling the ball 4 times, 5 times, and recovering 0 of them every single game. That's just there isn't anything in the water at TCO where the Vikings are just not able to hold on to the ball. So that's not going to be the case going forward. I do think an offense with Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, and Kirk Cousins playing at the level he is right now, with pass protection, which, by the way, is actually pretty good, I think that this passing offense is going to continue to be efficient, and we're not going to see Justin Jefferson fumble it out the back of the end zone every week or whatever. And I also don't think you're going to see a Kirk Cousins strip sack every single week either. So especially, cross your fingers if we can get Christian Darrisaw back, Garrett Bradbury back maybe, and if not, maybe we'll get Dalton Risner into the lineup. So with that, I'm going to sign off. Thank you for enduring the solo pod with me. I'm Nick Olson. You can find me at Nick Olson NFL. Matt Fries on vacation right now. He's at Fries Football on Twitter. Gregg Blake is at You've Been Gregged, double GD, on Instagram. He's too good looking to be relegated to the Twitterverse. You can find Kindred Skulls on iTunes, Stitcher. If you get podcasts somewhere else, you can probably find it there as well. I get it on Apple Podcasts because I'm a normie like that. You can also find Kindred Skulls on YouTube. If you want to see my face for podcasting, it's right there. And thank you for sticking with us. This is an ad-free podcast. We're not interested in that. We don't do it for any reason other than we like talking ball. And we like talking ball with you guys. And we like hearing what you guys have to say. So feel free to DM us. Give us feedback. If you think my microphone sucks, please tell me. Otherwise, thank you for listening. The reason I charted every single play is because I genuinely enjoy talking ball and talking ball with an audience. So you guys are the reason we do it. If you like us, give us a nice review and tell your friends, because we really strive to be to put in the work to grind the L22 and to make this something where we're not just talking out. Like Dalton Risner. I watched the L22 because I didn't want to tell you about Dalton Risner's punch or his stance or how he comes out of his stance or how he reaches on wide zone blocks without actually having watched it myself. I think anybody can do a podcast right now and look up Dalton Risner's grades, but surprisingly, there are very few people in the media who will actually go out and watch Dalton Risner's tape, which, give me your firsthand impressions. Tell me what you think about him. Don't tell me what Pro Football Focus thinks about him. So we try to put in the work to make this a worthwhile listen. If you think it is worthwhile, thank you, because that's why we do it. And if you don't, tell us so that I can go on vacation like Matt is right now. With that, goodbye. We love you, Skull. Enjoy. Bye, guys.
Goal, baby.
The first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. And we'll all cheer on behind, and we'll score the